What would happen if you didn't procrastinate anymore? How would you feel and how would your life be different? Procrastination can feel like we're not living up to our potential, that we're not living the life that we want or that we know that we're capable of. And to be able to stop procrastinating as much as we do, we have to know why we do it. I deal with the same problem like everyone else, that sometimes I procrastinate too much. So you have to figure out why you're procrastinating. That's the number one. Because there's no ideal person or some type of person that never procrastinates. That doesn't exist. So let's just get that out of the way right away. But there are people that procrastinate less than other people. If you've ever felt like you procrastinate a whole day away, then there's an issue. Then we have to figure out, how do we procrastinate less? And for that, we have to figure out the reasons that we procrastinate. So let's go over those now. The first one is thinking that we have too many choices. I've noticed that especially with creative people, artists, and people like that, the thing of too many options is always very prevalent. And there's a couple of reasons for that. As a creative person, you might be capable of many different things. There might be many different paths that you can take. And that does give you a lot of options, but with that comes indecision. And even if you do see one goal, or you know what your one goal is, you see many different ways of getting there. And again, this does the same thing. It creates indecision. Sometimes having less options makes it a little bit easier to really get started. So what happens is when we have too many options, we start overthinking it. We start trying to figure out what is the right decision, as if there's some kind of magical right decision that will be the best decision to make and that will get you where you want to go. There's also this fear of making a mistake, that you made the wrong decision, that you're wasting all this time. That's one of the biggest reasons we procrastinate, because we don't want to make that mistake. And I've noticed this with myself as well. When you're trying to decide what to do or what direction to go in or what actions to take, you really want to take the right action. And it can be very easy to spend a long time, sometimes months, some people years, thinking about what should I actually get started with. I don't want to start with the wrong thing. But then what happens is sometimes months will have passed, years will have passed, and you didn't even start. During that time, you could have made 5 different mistakes. You could have gone 5 different paths and it still would have been the same thing. You still would have spent as much time, but probably would have learned more or even stumbled upon the right way to do it, or quote unquote the right way to do it, but the way that would have helped you the most. So the first thing that we have to realize is that this thing that there is a best option is an illusion. Maybe there's many options that will get you there, and maybe some will be faster, some will be slower, but there isn't maybe no best option. And I think realizing that there is no best option will help stop the procrastination, because you can just choose a path and just learn as you go. That's pretty much the best mindset to have anyways. Learn as you go. Don't wait for this perfect way to do it. So I think for this point, remembering that it's not your final choice. It doesn't have to be your final choice. This can be the first choice you make, and you can pivot and change directions whenever you want. And I think this will take off a lot of the pressure of making the right choice, and instead be like, okay, this is the path that I'm taking now to learn, and I'm more than likely going to pivot. That takes the pressure off. And I've done this quite a lot in my own life. As you can see, like from the things that I've done in the past, I've worked in car logistics, which is a completely different industry. I've worked in the short-term rental space, which I still work in as well. I've worked in social media space, LinkedIn outreach, talent management, now production. So there's a lot of different paths that I've taken. And you could say, oh, but you wasted your time in this area or in car logistics, which is something that I ended up not liking and not wanting to continue doing. I didn't waste that time now in hindsight, because a lot of skills that I learned at the time I'm using now for production. Sales that I learned now is still a useful skill now. The project management is still a very useful skill now, and I wouldn't have done that without deciding on that direction. So now all those skills could come together with what I'm doing now and speed everything up now and make it easier for me. So I wouldn't have known that back then where I was going to be now, or what I was going to be doing. But it was better to take a decision and pick up those skills that you can now use as well. And that's why it's best to choose a decision, or choose a path, I should say, and just go with it and take everything as I'm learning this new skill. And this isn't permanent. I think that really helps alleviate the pressure, which will help stop the procrastination. That brings me to my second point, which kind of ties into the first point, is this fear of wasting time and resources. We're very afraid to invest our time and our money and all our other resources into something if we're not sure if it's going to pay off. And this was a big one for me as well when I've started things, because I think, oh, is this what I want to do the rest of my life? If you're going to see every decision as, do I want to do this as the rest of my life or the next couple of years, then that's a lot of pressure. Then it does become hard, and it actually makes complete sense that you would procrastinate, because then if it's that big of a decision, you shouldn't make that decision quickly. And so again, same as point one, I think realizing that this can be something that you literally change in a week or a month or a year. You can change the direction whenever you want, and it's never a failure. It's just more skills that you've learned. That brings me to my third point, which is another reason that people procrastinate, is what will my friends and family think? And even strangers on the internet. I know plenty of people that I've talked to that are afraid to be ridiculed, that are afraid to get hate, that are afraid to be made fun of by just random people on the internet. You're going to get made fun of anyway, and they're going to be haters anyway. There's always going to be people that have something negative to say, but it's important to realize that that negativity isn't really about you, usually because they're unhappy with their own life. Most people that are doing things and chasing their dream, or whatever they really want to do, applaud other people doing the same thing, whereas people that aren't doing that are usually the people that have something negative to say. The reality is the only way that you can prevent anyone ridiculing you, showing any hate towards what you're doing or saying anything negative is by doing nothing. It's the only way that you can prevent that, by doing nothing. And you probably don't want to do that. So I think it's more important to just accept and already maybe mentally prepare and realize, like, okay, I'm going to get some people saying negative things. There's going to be internet trolls that are just going to say something negative. So expect that to happen instead of, oh, I hope that doesn't happen. It will happen. And that's good, because if that's happening, then you're making progress. The other thing that helps with this as well, I think, is even those people that are saying something negative, they're saying it quickly, and then the next day, they're definitely not thinking about you anymore. Everyone's really caught up in their own life most of the time. Even the people that say something negative to you, like, they're saying that in that moment, and they probably don't think about you ever again the next day. That should also be very freeing. Most people don't really think about you. And then the fourth point is really 2 points, is thinking that we have too much to do, so it can be overwhelming, focusing too much on the end goal. Both of those go hand in hand. Tony Robbins says that we overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. There's a lot of truth to that, because we get very caught up in seeing progress on a daily basis. Sometimes it's hard to see progress until you really zoom out, or you're a year further and you look back at where you started and you realize, oh, I did do a lot, I did make a lot of progress. But it's very hard to see that when you're up close to it on a daily basis. And this can be especially hard when you're starting out basically with nothing and growing from nothing, because the beginning is always the hardest. Growing from zero to making your first $1,000 can be the hardest, because you've never done it before. So you have to get your first client, you have to sell your first product, whatever it is. And so there's a lot to overcome there, even beliefs, because once you get the first one, a part of your mind also realizes, like, okay, this is possible. If I can get 1, I can get 10, I can get 20. That's the biggest obstacle initially to get over, is that get really going. So expect the beginning to be harder, and realize that eventually there's going to be a point where things speed up quicker. They compound. And that's why it's really important to really dial in and focus on the process of what you're doing. Again, this also will give you clues if what you're doing is something that you enjoy and should be doing. Because if you're enjoying 0.0% of the process, then maybe you are on the wrong path. That gives you a clue, and then you can change paths. You need to be enjoying the process, at least most of it, to really sustainably keep doing it. Because if you're only focused on the end result, it's going to get really hard, because your whole time is going to be miserable unless you get your desired result. So you really need to be focused on the process and getting better at the process every single day. And the great thing is, if you're focused on the process, you're guaranteed to improve and get better. That's just how it works. Life works like that. Anything that you do, your skill improves. You might not see the results right away. Like, even let's say with YouTube right here, I might not be seeing the results right away of subscribers coming in a lot, or whatever my metric is of success in that area. But if you look at your own videos and I look back and I'm like, okay, I'm improving, I'm getting better. You know what I mean? And that's what you got to focus on. The results will come after that. They're always something that lags behind. So you have to get better before the results come. They're always going to be lagging behind. Plus, if you're only like excited about the end result and not the process, it's not going to be a fun journey. It's not going to be a fun life for you, because even if you get the result, which is definitely possible, there's plenty of people that get the result even when they don't like the process at all. That, like, they use their willpower, they force it, whatever they do, but the result is short-lived anyway. I mean, I'm sure you remember any result that you've gotten. Like, when you got there, it felt nice, but it was pretty short-lived. It's not like you felt nice for a year about that. You know what I mean? The intensity of feeling went away pretty quickly, and then the mind goes to, okay, what's next? Or sometimes you might have even felt like, oh, that was it? You know what I mean? Now what? So that means that if you only focused on the result, that's very short moments of that feeling that you're living for. And that seems to me like a very unhappy way to live. Whereas if you're enjoying the process, then the end result is a bonus. You know, they're little bonus moments for you. And then point 5 is that you think that you know where everything will end up. This also leads to a lot of procrastination, because sometimes you don't want to start something because you're like, oh, well, if I do this, the max it's going to do is get this. Like, let's say you're making a short film. You're like, oh, well, I can only go to short film festivals. Like, short films don't sell. Well, no, but short film could lead to multiple things that you have no idea about, even things that you maybe haven't even thought about. But it could lead to you getting a director opportunity for another movie. It could lead to funding for this short to become a feature. These are just like the most obvious ones, but you don't know where it's going to lead. And that should be a fun part of life, is trying to let go of the control that you know what every step leads to. Every decision you make, you know where it leads to. You don't. And that's a good thing. That makes it more fun. That makes it more exciting. So I think it's important to remember that you don't know what will lead where. And what you decide now, you could look back in 5 years and be like, oh, if I didn't know that decision would bring me here, you know, but you're happy that it did. So if you're always thinking of like, I know where this is going to end up, so I'm not going to do it because it's not big enough, or it's not like you don't like it, the end result again enough, then you're never going to do it because you think you know where it's going to end up. It's better to realize like, okay, I enjoy this, improving this will get me somewhere, and let's see where it leads. So in that way, just leave more room for mystery, for more fun, that you don't know where it's going to go. And for a lot of people who procrastinate a lot, control is a huge issue, you know, letting go of some control, that you can't control everything. And I know, especially nowadays with like a lot of people talking about like manifestation and things like that, which is a lot of good stuff there, manifestation, but there's also the danger that some of these gurus make it seem that everything is in your control. And that's just not true. Life is not completely in your control. Your decisions are in your control. But everything that happens in your life is not always in your control. There's a lot of stuff that happens in life that you can't prepare for, that you don't know are going to happen, what's going to happen, and that can be good or bad. But the reality is, you don't know where things are going to go, and you're not always in control as much as you think you are. And then number 6, and I think this is the most important one in many ways, and it's helped me the most, is procrastinating and not putting a deadline on something. And this goes for everything, especially creative pursuits. If you have a script, you have a movie, you have a song, whatever you have, you need to put a deadline on it. Because putting on a deadline, even just for yourself, will make you work towards that goal and actually get it done. If you have no deadline, you're always going to be endlessly trying to perfect it, or thinking like, I'm not in a rush, I have plenty of time, or there's no reason to get it done. It's very hard to get anything done. I remember for our first movie, that the only way that it actually got made and we got into production is because we finally just said, okay, let's just set a start date and make sure that we're working as hard as possible to have everything ready, funding and everything, to make that start date. And that forced us, and everyone around us as well, to be like, okay, this is when it's happening, so now we have to work and put pressure on getting this done. And you need pressure for people to come together and get something made. And so that's the biggest lesson that I learned from that movie, is as soon as you can, sooner than later, honestly. Like, you can already set a start date. If you were making a movie, you can set a start date after your first draft, you know, or even after you set your treatment. The earlier the better. If you just write your treatment of your script and you want to direct it, or you have a director on board, I would already set a date. I'd be like, okay, well, I got the treatment now, it'll take this much time for a script probably, so let's set the start date 9 months from now, and set an exact date, and start telling everyone this is when you're going to be shooting. That's going to get everyone on board, and it'll also make it more real, because the biggest thing, especially in any art, but especially in movies, is that everyone has great ideas, and everyone has all these scripts that they talk about, and many people like that, so it never feels real. Once you have a start date, it starts feeling real to you and to everyone around you, and that's how you can get things done. And lastly, this isn't point 7, but this is just something that I think is important, is just to make sure that you built in enough rest. The other thing that can happen is sometimes if you're kind of trying to be productive, but it's not happening, you're also not resting. So you're in a weird in-between stage that you're not getting rest, but you're also not really moving anything forward. And then you're mentally not fresh enough to actually do a great job. So it's actually better sometimes to be like, okay, I'm going to take this evening completely off and take off from everything, and not think about anything career work-wise related, and actually do something relaxing, whatever that is to you, and find out what's really rejuvenating for you. And I think that's really important too, because the more rested you are, the more your mind kind of relaxes, is when it can also be creative. It gets refilled then. That's how you should look at rest. It's almost like putting fuel in your car. When you rest, your brain gets filled up in that way. You know, your creativity fills back up. And you'll notice that, especially if you just go for a walk for 30, 40 minutes with no music, no nothing, that your mind eventually is relaxed and starts actually going to different ideas, or if whatever area you're thinking about, it starts actually coming up with ideas. Same with meditation. So I think it's important to let your mind rest, to build in rest and schedule that. It's as important as the work that you're doing. So I hope some of that helps. If you have anything that has worked for you to deal with procrastination, definitely comment below and let me know. I'll talk to you guys soon.